I don't go to many gigs these days, really. Those of us who've got plenty of miles under the wheels have probably attended hundreds in our lifetimes. And I've seen bands who put the greatest elaborate stage show together. And I've seen many a gig by small bands or punk bands that it's where it's all about the kind of the energy and that relentless forward momentum, that excitement that comes from those types of gigs. Recently, I've been to see two icons for many of us, and certainly for me, Peter Gabriel and then Bruce Springsteen in fairly quick succession. And it's fair to say that I've grown up with these two artists, have been very prominent in my record collection throughout the years. I mean, I first saw Peter Gabriel fronting Genesis in 1975, and then when he went solo after he left the band at the end of the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour, I saw him many times throughout the late 70s and the 80s, not so much in the 90s, couple of times, and I've seen him a couple of times in maybe the last 10 years. And this time, and Springsteen, of course, I've seen first time in 81, twice in Newcastle and Birmingham. And I totted up the number of gigs. It's probably around about 35, 36 so far. But I've not seen him for a number of years. So I've seen him on all the tours until about maybe 7 years ago or something like that. And I think partly because it was, for me, the set lists were becoming a little bit too predictable. Anyway, I wasn't going to go and see either of these bands. I thought with Gabriel, I had a friend of mine who prompted me. He said, "You fancy going to see Gabriel at the Utilita Arena in Birmingham, the old National Indoor Arena, I think it is." And 65 quid a ticket, and I thought, well, what the hell, I'll go along anyway. And I've been really interested with Gabriel's launching of his new album, which is called I/O, Input Stroke Output. He's been releasing individual tracks online every month for several months, which I still don't think we've got a release date for the physical album on CD or vinyl. Or presumably it'll be in the autumn. But I thought I'll go along anyway because Gabriel always puts on an interesting show. Visually, it's interesting. He's got some hit singles along the way, but he does some what people call deep cuts as well. So it's never boring when you go and see Peter Gabriel. Springsteen, different matter really. I was caught up in the furore and the kind of, I was irritated by the ticket prices. That there was kind of a big blow up back in the spring where the ticket prices were being announced, and there was going to be some dynamic pricing on tickets, I think, and it meant that some of the ticket prices were just crazy. And I put together a video of my thoughts on where I thought my relationship with Springsteen's music was, and that I wasn't really intending to go to any of the Springsteen gigs on this particular tour, because for me, with the release of Western Stars just down there somewhere, that album just passed me by. And his follow-up, Letter to You, was much better, of course, but and so give him credit for that. But I thought, well, no, he's done it now, and just to have another E Street Band tour doing like a greatest hit set just didn't really appeal to me. However, incredibly, a really good friend of mine gifted me a ticket, and his daughter couldn't go on the night, and he just says, "You can have it. I want you to come." And we travelled to see Springsteen on multiple occasions. We've seen him certainly all over the UK and Paris multiple times, and just incredible gesture of generosity. But despite that, I wasn't that enthusiastic about going. I kind of made my position really clear, but anyway, I'll talk about the gig in a moment or two. I mean, I don't go to gigs these days for nostalgic reasons. I don't go to greatest hits gigs. I'm not really interested. I do like my gigs these days. I mean, the different types of gigs. You know, I still see bands like Inhaler, which is full on energy and kind of small venue rock and roll. But when I go to a big gig, an event gig like Gabriel or Springsteen, I like my shows to have a bit of a purpose, a bit of a theme surrounding them. I like something. I like a big idea that sits behind these big shows, and you know, maybe a little bit like going to see, you know, if you're into classical music, going to see a Swan Lake ballet, Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. You know, the dynamics of it, the staging, the drama, the way it just envelops you it makes for a really memorable experience. And sometimes you can get that in a rock gig. And I had high hopes, certainly for Gabriel, less so for Springsteen, but I'll come on to that in a second. So anyway, I don't go for nostalgic reasons. I go for what it means to me in the moment. And as I say, I like the big theme. So anyway, Gabriel's show, which was as I mentioned, in Birmingham, really quite strange opening. He came on stage and he made this speech about artificial intelligence, and he cracked a joke about having an avatar somewhere on a kind of Caribbean beach. And it was the real Peter Gabriel was out there, and we were witnessing the avatar on stage in Birmingham. Kind of quite funny, but I thought what he was going to do, he was going to pick up this technology AI theme throughout the show, because you know he likes to be seen. It seems that way to me anyway. As like the great innovator, the guy who embraces innovation and new technology. And I thought, well, maybe what's going to happen here is that he's going to weave that theme into his show. And his shows always kind of had these themes going for them. You know, he talks about alienation and mental illness and obsession, and you know, the psychological themes are, you know, right the way through his music, even from his early solo albums, but certainly when you get to the late 80s and the 90s and beyond. Anyway, he started with that speech, and then him and most of the band, or maybe half the band to be fair, sat on these boxes in a semicircle at the front of the stage, doing what seemed to me like a little bit of an acoustic introduction. And you know, we were quite far from the stage, so the back projection screens, which came on at some point in the show, well, very early on in the show, in fact, but not at this moment. So when there's an intimate little exchange of semi-acoustic type presentation of one of his songs, it could only really have meant something to the people who are really close to the stage. So anybody who was, you know, 50 meters or away from the stage, like we were, it was kind of a bit of an indulgence, really, and no projections to look at to see the faces of the musicians and so on. Anyway, then he cracked on into the show and proceeded to play, I think I'm told, all of the tracks from the new album. As I say, it hasn't been released, and it was I wasn't just about the first half, but it went through into the second half as well. Now, look, don't get me wrong, the new tracks are amazing. I think it's going to be a really high quality album, but it's a lot to ask to get an audience to take on the new tracks and then leave the remainder of the set focusing on his kind of greatest hits: Salisbury Hill, Sledgehammer, Don't Give Up, In Your Eyes, Red Rain, and not much else to be frank. So Digging in the Dirt was in there, which was which came very early on in the set, and that was good. But on the one hand, it was kind of a schizophrenic show, really, as that the audience the atmosphere was kind of flat and then excitable. So flat in the new songs that people didn't recognise or didn't know that well. And then suddenly you go into mega hits like Sledgehammer, and the whole place was up and rocking. I thought it was really quite strange that the show didn't really, that theme of AI just didn't take hold, and it was kind of a bit of a mishmash to me. And he closed the show with Biko from Peter Gabriel 3. Now, back in the day when he was introducing or playing Biko for the first few times, I remember the atmosphere. It was absolutely electric. It was the politically charged. I mean, it was a big deal. The Biko song was a really big deal. Activists and protesters were still out there pushing back against South Africa's apartheid system, and Mandela was to be released in the years to come. But the Biko story was such a great one, and Gabriel did a fantastic job at highlighting that story to the Western world. And I think was as far as musicians were concerned, he was right up there with Little Steven Van Zandt and his Artist Against Apartheid and shows and the album that came from that. So Gabriel was very instrumental, very helpful. Anyway, but back a couple of weeks ago, well, a bit more than a couple of weeks ago now, about a month ago, it was all the political charge, if you like, had kind of gone. Really, it was like presenting a news story after the news story is over and done with, and it was like almost like he was like searching for a big number to end the show with. And in the previous show, sometimes he's had a low key ending, playing something like Father Son, a very emotional song, to bring a quiet ending to an exciting show. But this was the great big arms raised, fists raised kind of presentation that just seemed out of place to me. And I thought in the end, out of all the times I've seen Peter Gabriel, it was the least satisfying gig in my memory. I probably won't go and see him again because I can't imagine that he's going to be touring another album anytime soon, I think. But it's worth saying his voice is still in great shape. His band, David Rhodes, Tony Levin and others, Manu Katché on the drums, musicians that have been with him for years now, all great. And it was kind of interesting spectacle to watch the band and the bigger band, as it were, laughing and smiling with each other throughout the gig. But it seemed as that they were laughing with each other and not with the audience. It was like there was a detachment there to me that just made me feel that I kind of wasn't really involved in the show as I might otherwise have been. So anyway, least satisfying. Probably won't go and see Gabriel again. I'll definitely be buying the annual album, though, the I.O. album, when it comes out. Springsteen, Hyde Park, London. Fairly low expectations. I knew what the set list was going to be. The set lists had become very static in recent years. Gone are the days when he would take posters from the audience and spontaneously play different whole series of different songs. And but anyway, low expectations, but we had good access. I mean, the price of the ticket that my friend had paid was in the hundreds. So we were about 30 meters from the stage, so pretty good view. But the show was absolutely out of this world, incredible. Springsteen's energy, his voice, fantastic. Now, he doesn't do the knee slides anymore, but there's plenty of movement and plenty of passionate singing. And the whole theme of the show seemed to me was around defiance in the face of growing old. And this might have been the last tour that he'll do with the E Street Band, last international tour perhaps. You got a sense that was maybe behind this this commitment to connect with the fans and play the music that has kind of meant most, kind of defined him over the years. And so you had all the major kind of hits, as it were, with the exception of Thunder Road. Didn't play that one, kind of quite surprisingly, but astonishingly good. And although he's always connected well with the fans, I can't remember seeing him being so involved with those up front. And it's worth saying that the sound was amazing, possibly the best sound I've ever heard of any concert. Big open air, but with the bass bins they've got there, you can feel it, the bass in your chest, but with all the clarity as well. But they had like these 4K video screens behind the stage, which were amazing, super high quality. I mean, as I say, 30 meters from the stage, we could have been 300 meters from the stage, and those screens would have still delivered a really good experience.
Put on your record. Put on your record. Come on.
But down the front, you know, he's kind of between verses when he's singing down the front. He's shaking hands. He's kind of posing for selfies. He's giving guitar picks away, and there's a real connection, a real emotional connection with the fans. So, when I think about these two major artists, for me anyway, what strikes me is that these shows should have like an arc. They should ebb and flow, and Springsteen managed that absolutely perfectly, where the energy rose and fell in line with what he was singing about, and it kind of gave the audience a little bit of a rest, but as well as we went along the way. The love for Springsteen from the audience was just incredible. Whereas with Peter Gabriel's, it felt to me that there was no real arc. It was a mishmash of songs that resonated with the audience to very different, varying degrees, and it was ultimately an unsatisfying gig. So I wanted to say that there are two DVDs I want to recommend. There's also the album versions of these, but this one from Peter Gabriel, Growing Up Live. If you're interested in Peter Gabriel's music and you haven't got this DVD, you must buy it. It's absolutely sensational. It's everything that the show I've just described wasn't. Deep cuts, a real dynamic flow to the gig, wonderful climaxes, great endings, and so on and so forth. So Growing Up Live is essential. And the one to get for Springsteen, if you're interested, is Live in New York City, where you get him, 23, 24 years ago, something like that. And absolutely fantastic energy, great storytelling, versions that were very different from the album versions in many cases. So it's a real kind of discovery, really. Gabriel's a bit more kind of predictable. His songs usually sound very much like the studio versions, but in a live setting, whereas Springsteen kind of plays with the arrangements and so on. So anyway, two interesting gigs for me, and just felt that it was worth sharing some experiences here around how two seemingly giants of the rock music business can kind of present very different experiences to the audience. And I'm sure that people out there who will get this far into the video will disagree with me significantly or vehemently. So that's just my experience. So anyway, for what it's worth, I hope that was an interesting discussion about the two gigs, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Ta-da.